with that. I don't
Well,
know. Wait, am I good? Am I bad? Am I right? And there is no clarity on what needs to happen instead. They went from one extreme of not giving feedback to the
mm,
other extreme of giving a lot of feedback.
yeah,
And it got to the point that people stopped listening in. And if they don't have that trust, one is promising something, like the sales team is promising something to a client that the engineering and product team can't deliver on, and that breaks trust.
hello, team. I'm sure you're all aware that we're in a time where a single misstep in communication can damage not only relationships, but it also has the ability to disrupt even the most stable environments. Where building trust through clear, concise communication has never been more essential. And on today's episode, we're going to explore how leaders can foster this trust through clarity, courage, and conviction in communication. And joining us is Julie Holunga, leadership expert and founder of Chinook Executive Solutions. I hope I got that right, Julie. And we'll be
Yes.
discussing how professionals can develop their trusted voice as well as navigate conflict and even build cultures of alignment and accountability. So, Julie, welcome to the ET Project. Really excited to dive into how better communication builds stronger trust. And I know you talk a lot about this, so I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Thank you, Wayne. I'm excited to be here.
Let's start where guessing you do on most podcasts. Let's start with a little bit of a back journey and your backstory. One thing that jumped out to me because I traveled a lot during my career, but I noticed that you've studied abroad, France, India, Hong Kong, all places that I've been to as well. So, what was the experience for you?
Well, I was quite young, so it wasn't by choice. Um, but as we talk as a family, um, we talk about what an unbelievable experience it was, and sometimes unaware in the moment how great it was, but
Yeah,
in looking back, then you see, oh wow, that really, and it really shaped me, who I am, my curiosity in people and different cultures, whether we're talking about nationalities, different countries, but also cultures within teams and organizations.
yeah,
And it is amazing. The memories I have from those 7 years of living overseas are clear as day.
great.
And yeah, and really, I love talking about it, but was given very poor advice um, from a school counselor that when we were returning to the United States, to our home country, that no one was interested and don't talk about it. And that
Wow.
stuck with me for probably 30, 35 years until I realized, oh, this is something people are interested in, and it's unique and it's different. And how can I share these stories that
For
are
sure.
both funny, but so different than growing up that most of my friends and family had the opportunity to experience.
I can only imagine. Interesting advice.
Yeah.
You we have a large audience in India, so I'm
Mm.
guessing they're probably wondering where in India you were at the time.
Yeah, so we lived in New Delhi, on Panchil Marg, right near the American Embassy and the International School. And we were actually there when Indira Gandhi was assassinated. So that was a
Wow.
fascinating, scary
Mm,
time. And I remember my mom growing up always saying that she remembered very clearly where she was when JFK, John Kennedy, was assassinated. And
wow.
then, and I now remember very clearly where I was at school, how I learned that this has happened, what happened at the school. We were all brought into the gym that didn't have windows. And we were told that we saw the Marines as we
Mm,
were entering into the gym, but then we were told that the Marines were also on top of the building, that they didn't know. They were nervous, I guess, what else was going to happen. and
Right.
all the things that then did happen following that. At the time, my parents were in Nepal. My dad had a business trip and my mom went with him, and they couldn't
Mhm.
get back to New Delhi. And right, the time pre-cell phones, um,
Wow.
just a very, as a parent now, I imagine that a very stressful time for
Mm.
them. We were all safe and fine, but a very uneasy time for the people and the country as a whole. It was uh, unbelievable, to say the least.
I've
Yeah,
spent quite a lot of time over there, and I'm visualizing while you're talking, so I can only imagine what it must have been like at that moment. Yeah,
yeah.
incredible. You've also spent time in Hong Kong. I know we chatted
Yes,
about when we first
yes.
connected. What's your memory of Hong Kong?
Well, I we loved Hong Kong because coming from India, it was such a shift. The food was different, the topography
Mm.
was so different. Um, but the kindness in people was that was the theme throughout. And what we loved about, I was a teenager in Hong Kong and going uh, to Stanley Market to go shopping for Jordache jeans, in the 80s. And
Yes.
yeah, and just loving the people. It always came down to the people that we
Right.
became friends with.
Right.
And when I studied, then in university, I went back to France and studied for a couple months there and was touring a chateau in the Loire Valley and ran into other American students studying. And so, I don't know, there were half a dozen of them and half a dozen of us. And I kept looking at this girl thinking, God, she looks so familiar. And it turns out that we had gone to school together in Hong Kong, but had lost touch, right? There was no email then, there was no way. And I looked at her and I said, did you used to live in Hong Kong and go to the international school? And it was sort of the same thing was happening for her. And anyway, it was quite
Right.
funny. And then I did actually end up working with someone in Boston at Harvard University. And I had started a couple of years before her. And your typical first day, they walk her around.
Mm.
And they came and they said, "Oh, and this is Julie, and here's Kaya." And I said, "Kaya, it's Julie." Like I was so excited, but I guess she didn't feel the same way. But it was quite funny, I mean, it was probably 15 years later that, just that our worlds collided again. It's crazy.
It is. How much do you think that experience or those different memories had any influence on your leadership and your career?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I really think about the curiosity I have in people and to understand what got them where they are today, whether it's, I mean, mostly it's professional because that's my role and that's what I do. I
Yes.
really like to understand how people um, made a decision, whether there was a fork in the road and how they decided, or how they, you know, got on their career path and the choices
Right.
that they made and what they said yes to and what they said no to. I also find that I am far more open-minded because
Mm-hmm.
of those experiences where I was the odd man out, especially in India and Hong Kong,
Mm-hmm.
that I stood out in so many ways. I didn't speak the language. My skin was a different color. I
Yes.
dressed differently. And that because of that, it doesn't make me less off or less able to contribute in some way. So being able
Mm.
to have that perspective and understand where people are coming from really helps. I had a client for years, and they had operations all over the world, including France, India, and China. And which, just the ability to say, I get it. I understand. I
Yeah.
know you don't need to explain all those things to me. I understand
Yes.
culturally what that looks like. And
Mm.
so it really has shaped me. And as I said earlier, at the time I didn't understand how it was so different and unique in a really good way. I just saw, that I wasn't getting, certain foods. Like I really wanted Lucky Charms. Well, you couldn't get Lucky Charms in anywhere that we lived for 7 years. But now being able to reflect back and see just things a little differently
Mm,
I think makes my journey through life just that more interesting. And to have that curiosity and certainly now I'm in a place in life where I can travel quite a
mhm.
bit. Um, I have not been back to India. I would love to go. And at the same time, I remember it a certain way, and I don't know if I want to see it. I mean, obviously, it has grown since I was there in the 80s, but that's always something that I really enjoy revisiting. And
Right.
yeah, and I think a lot about bringing my family and being
Mm,
able to show them this is where I went to school. This is where we live. This is the playground I went to. These are the shops that we got our meals. This was my favorite restaurant. That's very exciting for me to have that opportunity, and hopefully that will come about one of these days soon.
I'm sure it will, and I fully agree with you on in relation to curiosity, and you carry this journey or this memory of the journey throughout your life, and
Yeah.
it's such a fascinating time. I read somewhere that you said you're on a mission and you want to rid the world of lazy leadership. So what does that mean to you? Lazy leadership.
Well,
I
lazy
suspect I
leaders.
knew a few.
Yeah. Yes. So I think we've all had moments where we have uh, practiced lazy leadership. And typically, where I see it happen is when people are stressed,
Mm,
when they are overworked or overwhelmed in some way, when there's a lot of pressure on them, and they tend to be reactive. And we've all, and when I'm in a room full of people, I always ask them certain questions.
mhm,
And there's always a couple people who don't raise their hands when I say like, have you ever been stressed? Have you ever behaved reactively? And I always say, thank you and for your honesty and everyone else. It's okay. I know you're lying, but it's okay. We'll let it pass for now because we've all been in these situations, right? Whether it's at work, whether it's with family, when our kids were teenagers, I had examples coming out of my ears of all the times that I was reactive because, you know, my family knew which buttons to push that would set me off. I like to say
right.
it wasn't intentional, but so when I think about lazy leadership, for instance, it's not giving someone feedback that they need to hear because it's uncomfortable for you,
Mhm,
right? I don't want to tell Wayne that he's underperforming or that email he sent was not accurate or that he isn't meeting expectations because it's uncomfortable for me.
yeah.
That's lazy leadership.
Right.
And what I look at the flip side, which is deliberate leadership,
Mhm,
is taking the time and the effort and slowing down for even a second to say, Wayne needs to hear this feedback and it's going to help him grow. And it's going to make my life easier, by the way. If people can think that way, then they are able to be proactive instead of reactive. And it really does help.
right.
Um, I have people come telling me all the time, oh, I thought this was going to be so much harder than it actually was.
Mm. On the excuse me, on the topic of feedback, probably you and I grew up in a period where we were told to sugarcoat it on both sides,
Exactly. Right.
sandwich it, and lead with something positive, finish with something positive,
Yeah.
but give the constructive feedback in the middle. How do you address that in today's world? Do you advise differently to that?
Yes, of course. Don't do it. I actually have a great example of all the different kinds of cookies, not to like that are bad examples of giving feedback. Because what happens is that if I tell you, you did such a good job dealing
Mhm.
with that difficult client, I really appreciate how you did that. But you undermined the firm or you undermined me. But you know what? You're great. As the recipient, I don't know what to do with that. I don't
Yep.
know what, wait, am I good? Am I bad? Am I right? And there is no clarity on what needs to happen instead. So what do I need to change?
Mm.
And that's what happens in that compliment sandwich, feedback sandwich, that people don't know what to do with it. I
Mm.
even hear from people, I say, well, what kind of feedback have you gotten? Oh, I keep being told I'm doing a great job, keep doing what I'm doing. And then that person isn't being promoted, or they're not getting placed on the exciting projects, or they're not getting placed in the complex engagements. What's going on? What's the disconnect? And often it's because if I tell you you're doing a great job, keep doing what you're doing, you're going to keep doing what you're doing, A, B, and C. But what
Mm.
I think you're doing great at is X, Y, and Z. And if I'm not clear giving you that feedback, you
Yes.
don't know what to continue doing well. And that's where that miscommunication, that communication gap happens because
Right.
we make an assumption when our brain wants to fill in the blanks, right?
Mhm.
So when I hear good job, I think, oh, I did a good job. Everything I did was great. I'm going to keep doing it.
Yeah.
But in fact, maybe what I didn't consider something that someone else thought was good.
Yeah. Very true. I'm hearing there's also a regularity aspect there in how frequent you give that feedback. It's not just about the twice a year performance
Exactly.
review. It's on a regular basis, I'm guessing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I find, but that's also a balance too.
Yes.
I had a client years ago and the team, they decided, oh, they went from one extreme of not giving feedback to the
Mm.
other extreme of giving a lot of feedback. And
Right.
it got to the point that people stopped listening because it felt disingenuous. Like, oh, I just
Mm.
have to give feedback after every single meeting, after every single email, after every single, and they stopped listening to it. So they
Right.
stopped hearing that constructive input that would allow them to do better. So it's finding this middle ground. I work with a lot of professional services firms. So sort of a blanket rule to go by is at the end of any engagement or the end of any case or
Mm.
project to sit down, the whole team, and talk about what could have gone better, what did we do really well, and what's something we could do even better.
Mm.
When there's this natural inflection point of the end or the conclusion of something,
Yep.
evaluate it, right? We do that for a lot of things, but not enough because what I always tell people is in a performance review, you should leave thinking to yourself, "Oh yeah, I knew all of that." If there's
Mhm.
something new that comes in a performance review, that's not
Yeah.
the best scenario.
There's a gap there for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's, as you mentioned, part of the reason for the reluctance to have these, let's say, constructive conversations at best, is that conflict aspect.
Hmm.
And I know you talk a lot about the positive aspects of having the right type of conflict. Can you speak a little bit to that as well, if you don't mind?
Yeah, yeah. So I look at conflict as there's two types. I mean, there's way more than that. But if we simplify it down to two types, either have destructive conflict, which it may be avoidance, it may be a delayed response. 3 months ago, Wayne, you said this, and I'm still carrying it with me, right?
Mm.
This destructive conflict that can become alienating or polarizing in the sense that you lose clients, you lose employees, you lose relationships of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, we have constructive conflict. And that's the kind of conflict where perhaps you and I are brainstorming a solution to a problem and we disagree or we're coming at it from different perspectives.
Right.
But we're invested in solving this problem, and even if I don't like you very much, I trust that you have a good perspective on things, and I'm going to
Mm.
listen to what you have to say. And I'm going to
Mm.
take the personal aspect out and really focus on, okay, we both want to solve this problem. So I'm not going to avoid this. I'm not going to hold back, but I'm going to push maybe, and I'm going to ask a lot of questions. So I always try to simplify things without being simplistic
Hmm.
so that people actually take action on it. So what I always say to people, when you find yourself in that moment, oh, I think there's a misunderstanding going on, or I think we have a difference of opinion. Okay, I'm in a moment of conflict and it can escalate or it can de-escalate.
Right.
My choice. So I'm going to take the destructive path, it will escalate. Or I'm going to take the constructive path and it will de-escalate.
Mm. And I guess that's the whole premise of psychological safety, having
Hmm.
that environment as well, right? Is you build that environment where people have that confidence to be able to have those disagreements and grow as a result, right? So you know that
Exactly.
everyone's there for the same beneficial outcome, and people are prepared to speak up and have a voice. You have a, I don't know if you call it a model or a method called the trusted voice paradigm. Um,
Yes.
and it's got four levels, and I've been reading through it a lot, and I'm quite fascinated by it. So I wonder if you could, we'll start with the high level, and then we might go a little bit deeper into each of the four levels. But could you introduce the paradigm overall, if you don't mind, please?
Sure. So the trusted voice paradigm is essentially looking at trust in all aspects of um, starting with the people, right? Your talent. Then we look at leaders, and then we look at teams, and then we look
Mhm.
at the organization or the firm as a whole. And this is a dynamic, I look at it as a wheel, right? It's constantly shifting, and you're constantly having to think about how do I build trust in my people?
Mm.
How do I build trust in the leaders? How do I build trust in my teams? And how do I build trust in the organization as a whole? And when we look at it holistically like this, then
Right.
people are better able to understand this is not just a one and done. Okay, I've built trust with my customers, so they're always going to buy from me, right? And that's the trust in the organization. No, because you make one mistake, like airlines is a great example of this. I trust you, XYZ airline, until you screw me over. Excuse me. But, right, like my flight's delayed and you don't pay for my hotel and you don't rebook me and you're nasty, whatever. Like, then you lose trust in the organization, in the company as a
Mhm.
whole. So the other three are more internal, right? So trust in the talent. That's I hire you and I trust that you can do what the job requires.
Mm.
And then leaders is I as an employee, I trust my leadership and people trust me as a leader. And then we think about teams, it's oftentimes people come to me and say it's within the team, but trust is also across teams. And that's the piece that I often see is gets let go or
Mm.
isn't focused on.
Mhm.
And I see it a lot, especially with engineers or product developers. And then you have the engineering department, you have the product department, you have the sales team, you have a business development people that are also working in. And if they don't have that trust, one is promising something, like the sales team is promising something to a client that the engineering and product team can't deliver on, and that breaks trust.
Mm.
And if we think about this as this constantly evolving wheel, with trust being that middle spoke, and we constantly feed it, right? So I think of it as a plant. You
Right.
right, you water your plant, you feed it, and it flowers. Well, then you don't stop watering it just because it flowered. So it's that idea, and I help people think through that when trust is broken, it may be from one pillar. I have four pillars that I look at
Mhm.
with with trust. So it may be that when you missed a deadline, let's say, and because of that, I don't trust you anymore.
Mm.
And when we sit down and I explain this and talk this through with people and we start peeling back that onion and I, kind of guide them in a certain way around the conversation, oftentimes people realize, well, you know what? I don't trust Wayne because of dependability, right?
Mhm.
He's not delivering on time. But I know that he generally cares about this project.
right.
And I know that he he typically does what he says he's going to do when he says he's going to do it. So what's going on that what happened here?
Mm,
And then the pillars are humanity, that they generally care about this project. It's authenticity. I do as I say, and I
mhm,
say as I do.
mm,
Right. So I'm not talking out both sides of my mouth, telling you one thing and telling someone else another thing. The
right.
dependability is I'll do what I say I'm going to do when I'm going to do it. And then the fourth piece that often people forget about is this aptitude. Do I have the skills, the
Mm,
resources, the knowledge to complete what I've committed to? And oftentimes there may be one or two of those pillars where trust has been broken. And when we can flip the switch in our minds and say, but I actually trust Wayne because I know he cares about this and I know he has the skills and the resources to
mm,
do this. All of a sudden, it's a very different conversation that
yeah.
again de-escalates that conflict. So you can approach the conversation by saying, like, Wayne, I know that I'm surprised that this was late. This is
Yeah.
not like you. I know that you care about this project. I know you have the knowledge and expertise and experience to complete this.
Mm,
What's going on?
yeah.
Why did you miss the deadline? And I want to trust you. I want us to have a trusting relationship. But when you miss a deadline, it makes me trust you less.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, then, to your point about the psychological safety, people feel comfortable to say, like, this literally just happened. And it's not funny, but this came out with a client. There was all this conflict and it's escalating, and one wanted to leave. And what came out when we were able to really peel back the onion was that the individual has a neighbor who had been diagnosed with cancer, and the individual was taking her to her radiation treatments or chemo, one of the two, every morning. And it
right.
just, he was feeling sad. He was feeling distracted. He was not producing the same way because
Mm,
of that. He didn't want to share because he didn't want pity. He didn't want anyone to feel bad for him or sorry for him. He also said, like, I was doing this because I care about my neighbor
mm,
and I wanted to help her out. And I didn't want anyone to think differently of me. And when he said that to me, I said, but people are going to think differently of you because this is a wonderful thing that you're doing. But he didn't, for whatever reason, he didn't think that way.
mm,
And once that was shared, it was amazing how many people said, okay, I got your back. I'm going to do this piece. If you could do this, I'm going to do this over here. And I can help you. Like he actually had someone junior on his team say to him, I'm going to make sure that I know all the pieces of the project to make sure that we meet this deadline. And and he said, and he shared with me privately, I had no idea that people would do that,
mm,
which kind of blew me away,
right. Right.
right? So there was so much trust in him that
Mm,
he didn't feel for whatever reason. He
mm,
doesn't know why. We're still working through that part, but it was amazing how many people stepped up and said, I'm willing to help. I don't,
mm,
I trust you. This was odd behavior, but it was I mean, it wasn't just one project. It was over
right.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a great example. And it it opens up so many tangents we could go down. But one of the things I'm hearing then is when we talk about four phases or four stages or four levels, we often form a linear picture
Hmm.
in our minds, and it sounds like it's anything other than that. It's more systemic. So it's very we're sort of keeping all of the parts of the process in play at all times and understanding the impact that
Right.
each part can have on the other parts. So
Exactly.
yeah, it's quite fascinating. Um, how do so as a coach, I'm coming along and I want to start to leverage this great model. How would I work with a client from a beginning point of view, if you could step me through the process to give me a little bit of clarity on how I might bring it to the table.
Right. So I typically, starting with a client, I will walk them through some questions that are really trying to, on the one hand, uncover what's going on, but also make people feel safe to share
Mm,
whatever it is that is going on, that there's no judgment, there's no wrong answer, but also help them think, why is there trust here but not here? And so we
mm,
walk through, and it starts with, tell me about your team. That's always, tell me,
right.
and usually I get some pretty superficial answers like, oh, we're
Yes.
like family. I get that all the time. And that to me is a good thing. And it's like family. So there's some ugliness, there's some sweeping under the rug. So that's
Mm,
always to me a little bit of a red flag. And I say like a tiny red flag because that's room to start questioning. Okay, tell me, like, what is it? Why is it like a family? Oh,
right.
we really trust each other and
Mm,
we want us all to succeed, and I've got her back and she's got mine. Oh, great. So what happens when you disagree? And then all of a sudden we start going down this path of being able to see where trust exists and where it
mhm,
doesn't, and how my goal is always like, if it exists over here, like there's a lot of trust in your talent. As individuals, there's a lot of trust. But as a team, I don't know if they really have my back.
yeah.
And they want to do, like, I hear this all the time. Like the sales team just wants to make their numbers. I don't trust that they really have my insights in mind. Or people say, oh, well, you can't say anything in front of HR because they're just going to report us.
It's going to get recorded and reported. Yes.
Right, exactly. And so being able to understand where it exists so that we can replicate and we can say, okay, what's going on that it's working here? And how do we transfer that? And what do you need, leader, to have trust in HR, to have trust in the sales team or in engineering or whatever, the group is? What is missing for you? And
Mm,
we're able to uncover both the opportunities and the strengths, like where it's a really strong, rooted trust. We still got to water it, we still got to fuel it. But
mm,
how do we take what's working well and transfer that over? So I firmly believe in the positive psychology aspects
yes.
of, right? Like not looking at what's not working, not looking at weaknesses, but instead looking at strengths to
Mm,
then be able to transfer over into places that aren't, or situations or circumstances that aren't working as well. Because I find that then the change sticks.
right. Right. There sounds like there's a lot of traits or a lot of elements, but heavily focused around the ability to communicate effectively.
Yeah.
And of course, communication is such a broad topic. I know you have a training or a learning in emergenetics,
Yes.
probably a term that not many people have heard of. Certainly myself, and I'm coming up to 50 years in the world of business, and I've never heard of this methodology before. So I'm really fascinated by this as well. But it's neuroscience based, I believe, and it's a profiling system. If I'm
Yes,
correct.
yes. Yeah, it's really a communications assessment to understand for professionals, for people on how they prefer to communicate. And we look
Mm,
at, and one of the reasons that I really delved deeply into this tool and became a master trainer with them is because it doesn't stereotype. There's no bad profile. There's no ideal profile.
mm,
And it separates how we behave with how we think. Because a lot of tools, there are a lot of amazing assessments out there. A
sure.
lot of them combine the two. And what I mean by that is, oh, you are right-brained, so therefore you must be an extrovert. Not always the case. You're left-brained, therefore you must be an introvert. Not always the case.
Yes.
And so helping people, the assessment, it's 100 questions. It goes by pretty quickly.
Mm,
Um, to take the assessment, it takes about 20 minutes. And people come away with understanding this is who I am, which is great. But the tool is so powerful because within a team, it helps people understand, oh, this is why Wayne asks all the why questions. He has an analytical brain. He's trying to understand the ROI. He wants to know the research. It better be, from a solid organization who he doesn't want to hear research says. He wants to know the American Heart Association
mm,
research shows X, Y, and Z. So understanding what someone else needs completely changes how we communicate. So I call this the titanium rule, which is built on the golden rule, which you all know. And then there's the platinum rule, which is kind of bringing it to the next level, thinking about what do other people need. And when I
right.
talk about the titanium rule, I define it as speak to others the way they want and need to be spoken to.
Mm,
So, not thinking about what I need to say, but what do you in my audience need to hear
mm,
and how? And understand, for instance, we have internal processors and we have external processors. I'm an external processor. I speak in order to think. So I'm going to say something out loud, talk it through. My husband, on the other hand, is an internal processor.
right.
So we always laugh about this. When we were dating, I would call him at work and I would say, you want to hang out tonight? You want to grab dinner? Sure. And he would say, well, where do you want to go? Or what kind of food do you want to get? And I would say, well, I had pizza for lunch, so I don't want pizza, but I have heard there's this great Thai restaurant and I think we should try it, but I've heard it's really busy, so we should go early. And I would give him this, long drawn out 5 minute answer. And he was very patient, is very patient with me. If roles were reversed and he said, "Hey," if I said to him, "Let's go out. What do you feel like?" It would be crickets. Because in his mind, he's saying, "Well, I had pizza for lunch, but I've heard about this great Thai restaurant."
Yes.
And and so I could joke around with him that once I really understood this tool and understood who I was, who he is, it saved our marriage because now I understand when he's silent, he's thinking the same thing that I'm thinking. I say
Mm,
it out loud. He says it out loud to himself.
yeah.
And he's got a great poker face, so I'm not going to see or hear it. Um, the other example I give of him is our kids played hockey, and when they were little, our son was in a game, and I think it was a state championship or I don't know, league championship game, and it went into overtime and another overtime, and then it went into a shootout, and they won. And afterwards, and it was very exciting. I mean, 12-year-old kids,
Sure.
but in the moment, it was very exciting. And afterwards, I said to my husband, who was coaching, I said, what'd you think? That was pretty fun. And he says, that was the most exciting game I've ever been to. And if I didn't know him, I would, what are you talking about? But that is, that was demonstrating his excitement. I may have exaggerated a tiny bit there, but not much. Um, but that I'm not going to hear this woo like, and I'm not going to see it on his face. But I know now, we've been together over 30 years. I know now what his excitement sounds like, looks like.
Mm, mm,
And in the workplace, we can misdiagnose someone's behavior.
right.
And then again, we have those communication gaps because I think,
Mm,
you're nodding your head at me, you're smiling. In my head, I like, oh, Wayne likes what I'm saying. I'm going to keep going. But if you were an internal processor, you may be nodding and smiling internally, and
right.
I might just see this great poker face.
Exactly. Exactly. But that
Yeah,
brings us all the way back to the lazy leadership, right? So
right,
all of this that you're talking about is very logical from that
right.
perspective. And you nailed me, by the way, analytical, very much so. But it requires the leader to take the time and to make the effort to understand their people and to understand the teams and their colleagues, etc., to get to this point, I can imagine, and that is really where you step in and you say, okay, well, let me help you do that. Would
Yeah,
I be right in that assumption?
exactly. Exactly. And it makes life easier for everyone, right? When
Yeah,
they understand each other on a different level.
right.
Yeah,
Provided they're all prepared to be open and transparent and feel
exactly.
they can trust the whole room. So,
Right,
so
right.
there's the whole thing in a nutshell. Really fascinating approach, and I may have to steal some of that, Julie, if
Yes, yes,
if I'm permitted. But I do enjoy looking at these different attributes, the thinking and the behavioural attributes, and I can see how you can tie that then back to the trusted voice paradigm. Um,
exactly.
you're doing a lot of different things at the moment, and I was enjoying your TED talk that you did, your TEDx talk. What you did that, what, 5 years back now?
Yep, yep, exactly.
And
Yes.
how much of that was premised on what we've spoken about?
All of it. All of it.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And really having this desire to impact as many people as possible.
Mm,
And that's a great avenue. And
right.
personally speaking, it was a huge challenge that I wanted to tackle. And Uh, I think a lot of us remember the first TED Talk we ever watched and or listened to. And so just having the ability to stand on that red circle was just unbelievable. And I highly recommend it to anyone listening if you have a good idea to share, get it out there because people need to hear things and understand. Uh, you have a message that needs to be heard and you can have an
Mm.
impact on people.
I mean, to that point, we most of our audience are leaders. How do they go about putting their name down to become a speaker for TED?
Yeah, so every organization is slightly different, but there's always an application process.
Right.
Um, I applied 4 times before I got it, so I was rejected 3 times.
Okay.
Um, I have a friend who was rejected 5 times before she got it, and I have a friend who got it the first time around. So,
Mm,
but know that there's a wide range, and it really depends on the theme that they're going for that year. What I found to be really successful in terms of having my application accepted was, and I've mentioned this already, it was simplifying the idea that I wanted, what is the message that I wanted to share? So you don't create the talk before you're accepted, but you
mm,
have to be really clear. What is the change I want to see? What's the message I want to deliver? And
yeah.
if you can be really clear on that, it's easier for the those who are reviewing the applications, and they get so many of them,
Right.
um, to see it. And I think about because now I want to do another one, and but I'm not quite there in terms of what is the message? What's the next
Mm,
message I want to share? I have a lot of ideas, but haven't fleshed it out yet. And so really talking to others, like, what are you hearing? Listening to what people are talking about. And if you have a particular take on things that has been helpful for you or for others, then maybe other
mm.
people need to hear that as well.
So it's almost like taking, many people talk about the keynote
Yeah,
speech that they have. It's almost like taking that and simplifying it to a point where they can pitch to
ex-
to TED in that regard.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And what I've learned is that they don't want um, any content that you've already been delivering. Like if you're on
Yes.
a
Yeah.
keynote, right, doing that all the time, they don't want to hear your keynote.
Yeah.
They want that fresh perspective.
On
And
that new
yeah,
perspective,
yeah,
that interesting topic. Yeah. Very.
right.
Yeah. Very. I haven't done it myself, but yeah, it's always been there. It's always been on that bucket list that
Yes. Well, get
one
to
day
it, Wayne.
I know. Terrible, I know. Julie, what are you working on? What are you looking towards in the near future? Anything coming up?
Yeah, so I have been thinking about how to take the trusted voice paradigm and get it out there into the world and really thinking about this idea, which by the way came about and during COVID when we were all at home
Right.
and all my travel had been canceled. And I went through and looked at what are all like looked at 10 years of notes from clients
Mm,
and what were the
mm,
common themes that kept coming up. And what I kept seeing when relationships worked, when relationships were challenged, was either there was trust or there wasn't.
right.
And so I'm thinking about how do I get that tangible into organizations and with leaders and within teams to help them. Yes, I can teach them how to build trust, but really
Mm,
taking a step back and thinking, how do I infuse it into everything that I do?
yeah.
Um, and the biggest thing is to find time to do that, but we'll get there. Um, but really thinking about, because I see that, especially now in our world, that trust is lacking in so many places.
Mm,
And how do we focus on it and think about that and not make it a nice to do or nice to have, but a necessity, and how to influence people in that capacity.
mm. Well, it's certainly a very important topic, as you mentioned, in our world today, which is a little bit
Yes,
crazy, I have to say. Uh, we definitely need good communication. We need that depth of trust, so that when things do go a little bit astray or say to one side, that we don't just throw the baby out with the bathwater, I guess, right? And
exactly.
we believe that there's a reason behind why that person must have reacted that way or did what they did. So
Yeah.
um, yeah, I think it's a great message. It's an important message. So I wish
Yeah.
you well with that, and
Thank you.
I look forward to staying connected. I have to say.
Yes. Yes, Wayne, this has been fun.
Thank you, Bill. Oh, by the way, before we finish, I almost forgot to ask, where can people connect with you?
Oh, so you can go to my website, which is julieholunga.com. I also suggest connecting with me on LinkedIn.
Mm,
I have a monthly newsletter, so not too much. It's a quick read. But I have a lot of people tell me that they get a lot of value out of the pieces that I write and the tips that I offer. So always happy. And if there's, I always say to people, if there's some situation that uh, you're dealing with conflict or you're having miscommunication or you have a lack of trust somewhere, and reach out and let me know what's going on. And I'm happy to support you however I can.
very nice. You also have an assessment on your website, I believe. Right.
Yes. Yes. And that's a quick one. It takes less than 7 minutes to go through. And it, again, it's the start of the conversation. Where is trust really strong and where is it lacking and where's the opportunity to build?
Well, Julie, thank you very much for coming on the ET project. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you, Wayne. It's been a lot of fun.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.